My grandfather Holden passed away on a Tuesday. By Thursday our family swarmed his house like bees to honey, cousins rummaging through rooms, Aunt Patricia clinging to the china cabinet, Uncle Warren silently assessing the dining set. I reminded them gently that the will hadn't even been read. Patricia shrugged it off, saying she was just organizing. The next morning we all squeezed into Lawyer Fitzpatrick's office for the official reading. Warren got the house, the cars, the investments, the jewelry, and antiques went to the cousins. Everyone else received token amounts. Then Fitzpatrick paused and read aloud to my grandson Theo, who helped me every summer with cataloging. I leave my full coin collection and all related materials. The room went still, then laughter erupted. Brianna called them worthless, dusty coins. Chad joked it was junk. Even Warren patted my back like he felt sorry. I said nothing. They didn't know I spent years with Grandpa, memorizing mint marks, understanding value, learning stories behind every piece. While they were off playing, I was by Grandpa's side. After the reading, I returned to the house. Warren already had movers around. Take what you want, Theo, he said. The rest is going. I gathered the collection exactly where it always had been, neatly sorted, albums labeled by decade and type. It took me 3 trips to bring it all to my apartment. On Monday, I contacted Henderson Numismatics. Mr. Vega answered and agreed to assess it. Bring it all, he said. Your grandfather had a name in this world. On Wednesday, when I arrived, Mr. Vega's eyes lit up. He inspected a few coins, called in Mrs. Rodriguez, then whispered, "I'm calling in a specialist. This is big news." On Friday, Dr. Sterling arrived and spent hours reviewing everything. After he finished, he looked at me. Your grandfather had a collector's eye. He showed me a 1909 SVDB penny, a 1916 D Mercury dime, and an 1893 S Morgan silver dollar. Rough estimate between 18 and 22 million. I stood speechless. He handed me his card. "We'll finalize next week, but it's one of the finest I've ever seen." That evening, I called my mom. 2 million, she gasped. "Don't say a word yet," I told her, "but word doesn't keep." Monday, Brianna called. "All sugary. We should split the coins as a family." She said he left them to me. I replied yes, but he wanted unity. She countered. I reminded her. She called it junk. She claimed stress made her say it. Chad, Patricia, even Warren all reached out one by one, trying to reason, warn, or guilt me. That same afternoon, they barged into my place. Warren, Patricia, Chad, all there. Patricia claimed misunderstanding. Warren's voice turned sharp. "You're being selfish," he said. "He never meant for you to be rich off this." I told them I had spent years beside Grandpa, not just a summer, not just a weekend. They argued. Legal action, said they'd claim undue influence, that Grandpa had diminished capacity, said he didn't know what he had. I told them to leave. They did. But the threats kept coming. I called my mom. She said this would turn ugly. She was right. Next morning, Fitzpatrick told me the will was strong and clear. We'd fight it. I moved the coins to a safety deposit box, took photos, documented every piece. That night, as I returned home, Chad stepped from the shadows. "Going somewhere?" he asked. "Just the bank," I said. He smirked. "Would hate for anything to happen to Grandpa's legacy." That night, my apartment was broken into, everything tossed, nothing taken. They hadn't found the coins. I called the police. Detective Morrison found Chad's fingerprints, lockpicks in his car, notes about dealers. He was arrested, said Warren and Patricia were involved. They wanted to recover the coins, claimed it was a family mission. I contacted Fitzpatrick. Criminal conspiracy would sink their case, but they didn't back down. My car was vandalized, tires slashed, note left saying drop the charges, or worse. I hid out in a hotel under a different name. Chad made bail. Warren paid for it. That night, I thought of Grandpa. Called Mrs. Rodriguez. She remembered Grandpa saying he kept secrets to avoid fights. Told me he left something for me, an envelope. I picked it up. Immediately inside it, Grandpa's handwriting, a letter. "Theo, if you're reading this, then you have the collection like I wanted. You probably know it's worth now. I never told the others I knew what would happen. Key to box 847 at First National is taped under the drawer in my desk. Don't let them take this, but don't let it change you either. Love, Grandpa. P.S. If it gets bad, there's something in the box that may help." I went to Grandpa's house at night, quietly slipped in, found the desk, retrieved the key, heard voices. Warren and Patricia searching. I hid. They left. I escaped. Next day, I opened box 847. Inside were receipts, insurance records, correspondence, proof Grandpa knew the value. There were letters to Warren inviting him to learn. Warren dismissed him, mocked the collection. The last letter was months before Grandpa died, begging the family to show interest. No one had. Then I found the video. Grandpa at the kitchen table. "My name is Holden Martino. Today is September 15th. I know my family won't respect my will. I know what this collection is worth. I leave it to Theo. He earned it. They all mocked me. He believed in this. This kills their case." Fitzpatrick said it's over. Then Warren called. "We need to talk." We met at a coffee shop. He looked tired, said he saw the video, said he regretted everything. He handed me a letter from Patricia. She apologized, admitted her greed, said the coins were never hers to claim. Brianna hadn't spoken yet, but Warren said she was thinking it over later. Warren invited me to collect anything sentimental from the house. I walked through the rooms, remembering summers with Grandpa, found albums, journals, letters Grandpa wrote about me, about my visits, about his hopes. He'd known exactly what would happen, and he chose me. Tuesday, Dr. Sterling suggested a museum donation, not for profit, but to honor the collection. I agreed, donated 80%, kept the rest, including our first coin, that 1943 copper penny. 6 months later, the exhibit opened. Everyone came, even Warren, Patricia, and Brianna. Chad wrote a letter of Apology. Patricia stood quietly reading Grandpa's quotes. She whispered, "This is what he would have wanted." Brianna approached and asked to start over. I said yes. That Christmas we shared a peaceful dinner. We remembered Grandpa, not his money, but his stories. I brought a Kennedy half-dollar. Warren examined it and said, "I never thought coins could be like history. That's what Grandpa believed." I replied. As I drove home, I realized the true inheritance wasn't the money, it was the lessons, the trust, the summers spent together. Now I speak at schools. I teach kids the joy of discovery. Grandpa's coins didn't just change my life, they transformed an entire family. A few weeks after the exhibit opened, I was invited to a national coin symposium in Chicago. They wanted me to speak on the Holden Martino collection and how it reshaped the conversation around private collectors and family legacies. I flew out with a suitcase full of presentation materials and Grandpa's magnifying glass in my coat pocket. The conference hall was packed, experts, dealers, historians, and even students from around the country. I stood before them nervous at first, but once I began talking about Grandpa, the words came easily. I shared how we cataloged coins every summer, how he taught me about mint marks, history, context, and how he said every coin has a story to tell. I told them about the inheritance, the fight, the threats, and the redemption, and how one man's quiet passion not only survived a family storm but became something much bigger than all of us. When I finished, the room gave me a standing ovation. Later, a museum director from New York approached me and asked if I'd help develop a national curriculum on numismatics for middle and high schools. I agreed without hesitation. That summer I traveled giving workshops, visiting schools, even appearing on a couple podcasts about rare collectibles and legacy planning. Grandpa's name was becoming nationally known, not because of how much he had, but because of how much he cared. One day an envelope arrived at the museum. It was from a small-town librarian in Missouri. She wrote that an elderly man had left behind several coins and books in the local library, with a note that said, "For someone like Theo." The librarian wasn't sure what it meant until she saw a news segment about the Holden Martino exhibit. She shipped the materials to me. Inside I found coins Grandpa had once mentioned but never showed me, low value but high-meaning coins he likely gave away as gifts long ago to others who shared his love for collecting. The books were filled with his handwriting, his notes, his theories, his quiet humor. I created a new corner in the exhibit called The Letters of Holden, a place where guests could read his thoughts and feel what I felt growing up. Around this time, Warren surprised me by announcing he was starting a scholarship fund in Grandpa's name for students pursuing history and preservation. I helped set up the program, and we awarded the first scholarship that fall. The recipient, a high school girl from New Mexico, wanted to study artifact conservation. She cried when she received the award, said she felt like someone finally believed in her. Patricia continued volunteering. She ran seminars on financial planning for young mothers and gave a speech about how wealth without values is just chaos. Chad was doing his community work and occasionally helped the museum move delicate pieces when no one else could be trusted. He kept his head down, but was slowly earning back everyone's trust. Even Brianna became one of the museum's docents, walking school kids through the exhibit and telling them Grandpa's jokes badly but with heart. One cold October morning, I walked into the museum early to prep for a field trip. A little boy stood in the coin room alone, staring at the 1893 S. Morgan dollar. He turned to me and asked, "Is this really worth millions?" I smiled. "Maybe, but its real value is the story behind it." The boy looked up wide-eyed. "Did your grandpa give it to you?" I nodded. "He trusted me to take care of it, to make sure others understood why it mattered." The boy whispered, "I want to collect coins too." I handed him a starter guide and told him Grandpa always said every collector starts with one lucky find. That afternoon I sat in the staff room flipping through Grandpa's old journal again. One line caught me off guard: "Love is not in the giving, but in the teaching, and the greatest gift we can leave behind is curiosity." That night I walked home and stopped by a small antique shop I'd passed for years, but never entered inside. The owner showed me a drawer of coins, old World War era pennies, nickels with rusted edges. Nothing of high value, but I spotted one coin, a battered 1945 wheat penny that felt familiar. I bought it for $1, cleaned it up, and placed it on my desk next to the 1943 copper penny Grandpa and I found years ago. I stared at them side by side. One, our first memory, one, my new beginning, and that was the moment I understood the legacy continues not just through museums or awards, but through choices, quiet, persistent ones, made every day. One more student, one more classroom, one more story shared. Grandpa once said that every coin has two sides, not just heads and tails, but history and future, and now I was part of both. The following spring I received a call from Dr. Sterling. He said the American Numismatic Society wanted to permanently feature part of the Holden Martino collection in their National Archive, a rotating exhibit with educational panels, interviews, and even a short documentary. He asked if I would narrate it. I said yes, of course. The filming began in May. I brought Grandpa's notes, photos, and some coins we hadn't shown before. Behind the camera I shared our stories, the late nights cataloging, the long Talks about history, the quiet moments filled with meaning. I told them about the fight, the betrayal, the healing, the lessons I learned, and the man behind it all. Grandpa Holden. The documentary aired nationally that summer. Teachers wrote to the museum asking for copies. Parents said their children wanted to learn coin collecting. Even schools overseas requested translations. One morning I found myself at a cafe where the waitress recognized me. From the documentary, she smiled shyly and said I called my grandfather. After watching it, I never really listened to his hobbies before, but now I want to know everything. He was so happy. You reminded me how important it is to care. That moment felt like full circle. Grandpa changed me, and now through his story we were changing others. Months later, I was invited to Capitol Hill. A senator proposed a resolution to declare October National Heritage Collectors Month and wanted to recognize Holden Martino in the bill. I stood at a podium in a crisp black suit, reading a speech I'd written the night before. I spoke about legacy, about preserving not just objects but the love and intention behind them. When I said Grandpa's name, the room fell silent. Then applause started, small, then spread through the chamber. I felt him in that room, as if he were standing beside me, proud. Later that night, I visited his grave for the first time in months. I brought the 1943 copper penny, placed it on the stone, and whispered, I hope I did right by you, Grandpa, because you gave me more than coins, you gave me purpose. As I turned to leave, I saw a small card tucked into the flowers at his grave. It read, thank you for the legacy. Holden signed, a student collector. That was it, simple but powerful. Another ripple in the pond he had started years past. I kept working at the museum, traveling, teaching, living a quiet but fulfilling life. I didn't need more money, I had what mattered. One afternoon I received a call from a young man named Eric. He said he'd inherited a small coin box from his grandfather, but had no idea what it was. Had heard about me and hoped I could take a look. He brought the box in nervous hands, voice cracking as he opened it. Inside were a few scattered coins, a magnifying glass, and a tiny notebook with familiar handwriting. My breath caught. Holden Martino. It was one of Grandpa's starter kits. I remembered him making these for young collectors back in the 90s. I opened the notebook. Inside were checklists, questions, things to research, and at the very back a note, if you're reading this, it means you've taken your first step. Welcome to the world of stories. Eric looked at me confused. Is this important? I smiled hugely. I said, this isn't just coins, it's connection, legacy. And now it's yours. That evening, I added a new plaque to the museum wall. It read, Holden Martino, collector, teacher, grandfather. His wealth was never just in coins, but in curiosity, care, and love. And beneath that, a small shelf holding the original 1943 copper penny and the starter kit that found its way home again. Generations from now, someone will stand in front of that plaque and feel inspired. Maybe they'll start their own collection. Maybe they'll call their grandparents. Maybe they'll realize that the smallest objects can hold the greatest meaning. And maybe, just maybe, they'll understand that true legacy isn't left behind, it lives on quietly through the lives we touch.